Hello, this is Business Agility Life again. I'm your host, Mike Laber today, and with me, Jeff Gothelf, our guest. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Mike. Good to be here. Good to talk to you again.
Great having you. Yeah, again, we actually had a meetup this week, and there's something to celebrate, and we'll probably talk about it. It's your new book, Forever Employable. We're going to talk about it. It's a super interesting concept, idea, offering, and probably as relevant than ever. But before I want to, let yourself maybe introduce yourself a little bit, because what is behind you is the cover of one probably of your most famous books out there. It's called Lean UX, and I think you mentioned it in your new book. You're the kind of Lean UX guy, right?
I am the Lean UX guy.
Yeah, the Lean UX guy, and I think that's a very important concept too. Still, right?
Absolutely.
Jeff, tell a little bit about yourself. So. Lean UX,
sure.
Where are you coming from?
Sure. So I used to be a broke musician. That's where I come from.
Right.
I tried for a long time to be a rock star. That was my dream, Mike. I don't know if you know that, but my dream was initially to just be a rock star. And I tried. I gave it a shot, and it didn't work out, and I was broke. And so I've been a web designer. I've been a front end developer is a strong word in that HTML is not really writing code, but I did that back in the early days of the web. About 10 years into my career, I wrote a book called Lean UX, which is the one hanging over my head. And really the challenge there that I was solving this for myself and my team. My team and I were solving this together, which was integrating agile software development and user experience design. Two things that sadly to this day still struggle to coexist in ways, but in 2008, 9, and 10, and this book came out in 2013, ultimately, we were working on figuring that out. And that's what this book is about. And because a lot of folks are dealing with that, the book became very popular and continues to be very popular. In fact, it's in its second edition now, and next year there'll be a third edition. So continues to be a good popular book. But the interesting thing is that since then, I've been doing a lot of teaching and consulting and speaking on this topic. Wrote another book with Josh Seiden called Sense and Respond. In fact, I happen to have a copy of it right here because I was looking at it just yesterday for the first time, which is a business book. Yeah. And the book Sense and Respond was really Well, it was, to be a bit cliche about it, it's a response to what we were sensing from the market. There was every time somebody took a Lean UX class or saw a Lean UX speech or read a Lean UX article, we would always get at least a few people coming back and saying, "That was great. I wish my boss was here."
All right.
Because we want to work this way, but my company doesn't work this way, or my boss doesn't let us work this way. So sense and respond, really, right? And so really, if you look at the subtitle, it says how successful organizations listen to customers and create new products continuously. Now, that should sound familiar because it has a lot of agile themes in it. We did our best to avoid the agile brand, but that book was a business book. And then since then, I've been doing kind of more executive coaching and consulting. And most recently, as you mentioned, in fact, as of this week, published this book called Forever Employable, which at first glance, you'll say, well, Jeff, that's very different from UX design and lean and agile and all that stuff. And you're right to some extent, but the principles are very similar. And we'll talk about that some more, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a amazing arc. It's a coherent story, obviously, but I think we need to talk a little bit about it so that people who are watching or later on watching this video have an understanding. So product is obviously highly important to everyone. Every organization wants to innovate, wants to become a more digital, let's say, ecosystem, and find new customers, new channels, and everything. And that's probably a lot about product, right? And that points me, I want to start the discussion probably around the Lean UX idea and sense and respond, because we're talking a lot about organizations here, which doesn't mean we don't talk about individuals, but like leaders, that's also very, very important, or who is in the organization. But what do you think? What's differentiating organizations who are ready to survive and thrive from the others who are not getting there? If we talk about Lean UX, if we talk about sensing and responding as a capability.
So look, I think that the organizations that succeed and survive, especially in times of crisis, are the organizations that exhibit agility, right? So if we talk about business agility, I think it's the organizations that exhibit agility. But let's break that down a little bit, because the principles that we talk about in Lean UX and in Sense and Respond are the underlying principles that drive the agility of the business. So we start from an outside-in perspective. We take a customer-centric look at our work rather than an inside-out perspective, which generally a lot of organizations do. They say things like, we'll build this service, right? Or we'll build this product and people will love it because we're smart and we're, good at our jobs, right? This new short form video service, Quibi, or I don't know how to say Quibi. I've never heard anybody actually say the word, right?
Yeah.
They spent $1 billion on it and it's floundering, right?
Yeah.
No user testing, no market validation, it's just, and it's organizations that operate like that with the assumption that they know what's best, that don't exhibit this agility and that stand a far lesser chance of succeeding in this world. So it's this is the way I see it. I think it's really simple when you break it down to articulate where agility comes from. Much more difficult to implement. But I think, in my opinion and in my experience, the basic goal is a customer-centric perspective on the world. If you take a customer user, whoever's you're building your products and services for, and you say, look, they have a problem that we're solving for them. And we're solving that for them by building systems, right? We're not building we're building software, right? We're not building static units of physical product. Like, we're not making Sharpies, right? Yeah. So we're building systems for them. Those systems are continuous, which means that we can work on those systems forever. And working on those systems should not necessarily mean continuously adding to them. It should be editing, it should be deleting, it should be optimizing the system to meet the changing needs of our customers. Now, the nice thing about technology today is that technology is also continuous, which means that you can get these ideas into the hands of your customers very, very quickly. And then equally as quickly, assess the impact on their behavior. And if their behavior changes for the better, for their in a positive way for your customers and users, well, let's do more of that. Let's scale that up. Let's optimize it. Let's make it better. And if it changes their behavior for the worse, well, let's roll that back. Let's learn from that. Let's understand why that happened, and then let's try again. And it's that continuous learning and that continuous course correction based on evidence of customer behavior that lies at the core of agility. And the organizations that can harness not only the technology that allows to do this, but the culture, that enables the psychological safety and the decision-making to happen, and then takes advantage of that technology, those are going to be agile organizations, lowercase a, right? And those are going to be the organizations that thrive and survive.
So while you were talking, I was thinking that 3 points came into my mind. First, data, because obviously, and you mentioned software, and some hardware companies might now say, okay, that's about software. Again, we got it. It's not for us. But I think that's not right, because data is obviously heavily important these days, more than ever. It's been there since 20 years. But I think companies like Amazon made it really very obvious how you run a data-driven organization. And that brought me to the point, hey, Amazon tries to disrupt every industry. And now we are into, for example, grocery stores. And hey, they're talking not one monolithic thing and it's hardware and it's like it has ever been. They're creating a platform. They're creating a service, as you said. And second, what came into my mind was Tesla. Saying, hey, we're creating a platform and it's software and we are updating our software on a frequent basis. And other companies like VW and everybody's behind, and I think they have a hard time even where to look at to say, oh, no, it's electric, but it's not only electric, it's also software, it's a whole ecosystem. What are we going to do? And then he talks about self-driven, and then he talks about we're not going to sell it anymore. We're going to, I don't know, it's highly interesting. What does it take for a traditional thinking company to become a sense and respond company? To get all of this?
It's a good question. And look, and there's good inspiration there, right? I mean, look, Tesla's a good example in the sense that those are software people who started making cars rather than car people who started making software, right? It's a fundamental difference, right? I saw recently, within the last year or two, some statistic that BMW put out, and they said, a new BMW rolls off the line every 0.74 minutes or something like that, like one new BMW per minute, something like that. And they were proud of that statistic. And to me, that's, again, you're proud of output, right? You're proud of producing, of manufacturing a thing. And there's an amazing progress in technology and learning that's got into that. But are you meeting customer needs? And how are you continuously improving the value of that product that you just delivered? Whereas Tesla, right, they sell you basically this vehicle that continuously improves. You wake up in the morning, the car can park itself. You wake up in the morning, you get 5% more power because the software has been updated. You wake up in the morning, the car will come around the house and pick you up in the front, right? It drives itself. All of these things that the car couldn't do when you bought it. Like, imagine that for a BMW or a VW or whatever, and so really you have to force yourself to think like a software company. I'll tell you a story. So how does a company become sense and respond company? I did some training a couple of years back now with Ericsson. Ericsson is it's an industrial manufacturing company. They make a lot of big machines, metal machines that do stuff, right? Everything from bend pipes to, and one of the teams I was working with was making industrial air conditioning units. So these are metal boxes that are the size of a small house, and they sit on top of skyscrapers, and they provide air conditioning for 30, 40, 50, 75 floors, right? That's what they do. And I came in there and I started talking about sense and respond and experimentation and continuous learning. And they said, that's great, Jeff. We make metal boxes the size of a house that cost $1 million. How do we test that? And so it was really interesting, kind of walking them back and challenging them to think about that and say, okay, great. What are the assumptions that have gone into building this machine? And how do you know that they're right? And what are the risks of being wrong? And then let's talk about how to test those things. And so we talked about ways to learn. So yes, you can't put out a at some point you have to manufacture the box, right? But before you manufacture the box, you could go out and you can talk to prospective customers and see if they'll sign a letter of intent, right?
Yeah.
So if you deliver on these 5 things, I will buy this thing from you. That's a test.
Yeah.
That's a test in
Yeah.
the market.
Yeah.
You know, and they're making a series of assumptions that of features and values that they're going to bake into this product that organizations have that maybe they don't have. We talked about the potential to do 3D printing, or even simply to mock up. Right, this thing is so big. Why don't we just mock it up with cardboard? Right, we'll take a bunch of cardboard boxes and slice them with tape and mock up the form factor of this thing, and then test it. And to them, this was a completely foreign concept before I walked in the room. But when I left, they understood that there was tremendous risk, even in their big physical metal boxes, you know, the things that are making. And there was an opportunity to kind of think sooner and learn more quickly, and then change ultimately what they were going to build and ultimately make. And that is, that's what it takes. Is it takes someone to challenge the status quo. It takes someone to come in and say, we've been taking a lot of unnecessary risk with some of our work. And maybe there are better ways for us to deliver value to our customers or to solve their problems. You know, and look, the challenge with a lot of these organizations is that they're big and they're successful. Like they've done well over the last 20, 40, 50, 60 years. And so their attitude is like, look, we know how to do this, so we'll just keep doing it. But you can't rest on that, because the world is changing too quickly. And I think the things that got you here aren't going to get you there.
Exactly. So that's highly interesting. I was just wondering, you know, we don't, I think we're not learning, or I mean, it depends where you go, who's going where, learn that as business schools a lot. I mean, modern business schools might now look more at it like leadership for innovation and what innovation really means, instead of just saying, hey, we need to get a good product out from the R&D department pretty soon, but really saying, hey, we need to think about how to actually, you know, put bets on the table, bets about a business model, and how would we run this. I think that's a totally different, let's say, stance, as you just said, than being a manager who is good at execution, like running a huge company, like being able to, you know, take care for operations and make sure they work, 100,000 employees and everything. Probably a total different thing. I was just thinking now, because that brings me actually to your new book. If I was a manager and would say, wow, I admire people like, it's just taking the simple examples here, Steve Jobs, not there anymore, always admired, at least for his, not for his personality probably, but a lot for his product thinking. I remember there was a quote once, I think it was a quote, but anyway, I feel it's good. Or, you know, some people might say, top managers, I take care mainly for the financials. That's the most important thing. For the rest, I've got my people. Whereas Steve Jobs would have said, I take care mainly for the product, because for the rest, I've got my people. Yeah. So that basically means, and I've got this a little bit of a hypothesis, as a manager, as a leader, which I even like more, moving my organization into this new arena of digital, software-oriented businesses, ecosystems, I probably need to reinvent myself. I probably need to say, hey, I need to be a product person. I need to be the chief product officer or something, and not just somebody who's good at execution, right?
Yeah.
And now here comes the question. What am I going to do then? Reinventing myself, and that brings me a little bit to your story, closely approaching the new book.
Yeah, look, the reality is this. I think that, and I've had experience with this. You know, I did an executive coaching gig in the United States for about 6 months with the leadership team of a bank. It's one of the bigger banks in the United States, and the people that we were coaching at that time, we were in there doing agile coaching was the premise, but we weren't teaching them stand-ups and velocity and burn down charts and retrospectives. what we came in to help them understand how to lead an agile business, how to manage an agile business, because their people were learning it.
Right.
And look, you're in a room with 10 people who between them have 300 years of experience running financial institutions, right? I'm never going to compete with that, right? That's not what I'm not there to tell them how to run a bank. What I was there to help them with was to understand that they're no longer running a traditional bank. They're running a financial services business that is ultimately a software business underneath. It's a digital, it sits on top of a digital platform. And that fundamentally changes who you hire, how you staff, how you incentivize, how you manage products, how you build this whole thing. And this was it's always the hardest part of these engagements, is getting folks who have been very, very successful leading businesses, especially traditional businesses like financial services, and getting them to understand that while the domain expertise remains the same, the way that you deliver that domain expertise has to change. The level of control that you have had in the past isn't there anymore. And so so you really do have to reinvent yourself continuously to deal with and succeed in the modern context. And to be clear, that modern context, sadly for folks where it was static for maybe 20 or 30 years, is now shifting every couple of years, right? Every couple of years, there's kind of a new trend that you really have to adapt. It's probably shorter than that, but at least, right, you've got to kind of stay on top of things and really understand how people are engaging and consuming. And that's difficult. It's a different way of working, and it requires, and this is organizations that succeed with their digital transformations, with their agile transformations. Organizations that succeed have leaders who are humble enough to recognize what they know and what they don't know, and that seek out continuous improvement and continuous learning for themselves so that they can be more current in their thinking and more effective in their leadership. And it's the organizations that have leaders who don't display those qualities that struggle, because that permeates the culture as well.
Right. That sounds awesome and very interesting. And that brings me a little bit to your new book. And I'll try it this way. Let's assume now I'm a manager, maybe even a senior manager in one of those companies where middle management is not a big thing anymore. A lot of my colleagues, are looking already for their future and saying, hey, wow, middle management is not a trend. I think I need to, think about my career. I've got a family at home, got a loan maybe, got a nice house. I don't want to lose it. And I'm worried that I won't get a lot of new job offerings in this space anymore. So I'm going to reinvent myself. I want to think about it. And now I've suddenly found your book, fresh on the market, forever employable. Hey, that sounds
it makes a big promise,
exactly.
Right? It's a big
and
promise
now
for a relatively small book.
All right, but it's still good. I love the audiobook, by the way. I mentioned it the other day. Highly recommended. Good speaker. It's unfortunately not yourself, but it's again a good speaker and very nice to listen to in the car and wherever you are commuting. Well, people are not commuting anymore, right? That's also changed. Now, I read your name, Jeff Gothelf, so I want to approach you and say, hey, let's see if Jeff can help me and tell me a little bit about it. Maybe I want to hire him as a coach, as a personal coach. What is it about Forever Employable? What's behind of all of this?
Yes. So look, again, what it's about is thinking about it's about building a platform around yourself, a platform of thought leadership, recognized expertise, based on your experiences, based on your expertise, in an effort to create a safety net for your employment, to future-proof your career. It's based on the work that I've done over the last 12 or 13 years or so to build that kind of platform for myself. And my ultimate goal here is to reduce the stress for individuals who find themselves in situations where there's instability in their job. And look, this is something that I've been thinking about the last 20 years. I've been working professionally for 20 years. In the 20 years I've been working, we've had the dot-com crash. We've had 9/11. We've had the Great Recession. We've had the financial crisis, Great Recession, and now we've got a pandemic, right? So every few years, and that doesn't account for just organizations reorganizing, downsizing, going out of business, merging, being acquired, like none of that stuff, right? That kind of stuff happens. Clearly, it happens, and I know tons of people who have this panicked response to that, rightfully so. Right? Oh my God, there's a pandemic. Oh my God, there's layoffs. Oh my God, we're being acquired, right? I've got to get my CV done, get it out there and start finding my next job. Forever Employable is designed to help reduce that stress, right? The tactics in the book and the stories that I tell in the book about myself and others illustrate how people have built content platforms around themselves to share their expertise, to share their domain knowledge, to give back to the community, to give back to the industry. So with direct desire to drive inbound leads, inbound opportunities to you, because now you're the recognized expert in business agility, corporate accounting, front-end web development, whatever it is. And so the book goes through step by step what I did to build this, how I did it, and it uses the principles of agility, continuous improvement, continuous learning, humility to de-risk the effort that you're going to put into this. Because look, ultimately this takes time, it takes consistency, and it takes effort to do this. This is not, it can be a hobby, but this is not something you do once on a weekend and hope that it works, right? This is a continuous thing. If you're going to exert that kind of effort, if you're going to spend that kind of time, you should work on the things that are going to deliver or stand the greatest chance of delivering the results that you're looking for. And that's when we come back to assumptions, hypotheses, experiments, pivots, short cycle time, inspecting and adapting, that type of thing. And so the book uses those same principles, but applies them to yourself, to your career, your professional development, your personal growth.
Right. Now that's really compelling. Say it this way. And there is another interesting one. Say I go into this direction. Do you think that would? I mean, you mentioned giving back to communities and everything. I think that makes it at least a little bit more social, right? Because building your own brand could look like there's a lot of ego shooters now coming up. A lot of me's, which is fair enough. If it's good products, why not? I don't care. I don't worry about being in a market of whatever and seeing great products, having choice. That's no problem. But I'm looking now at a different perspective. Now thinking about organizations, and I know you're offering this concept to anyone, either outside being an self-employed person, maybe this manager we just talked about decided, hey, I'm going to start my own career, my own business, and become self-employed with whatever it is. Or it could be inside organizations. And, inside organizations is anyway a relative thing today because many organizations struggle to find great people. So there is this war for talent. And at the same time, there's a lot of shift in how organizations show up. I'm thinking about Hayer. That's the most extreme I can think about, to say, hey, our organization is, again, a platform. It's just a network of micro enterprises and entrepreneurs. And I'm thinking about these extremes to say, is that something where Forever Employable actually perfectly fits in? And if so, what would it take an organization to think about that? I'm just thinking about the HR department. Hey, guys, you have to make all your people great heroes. That wouldn't resonate, I can imagine, a lot with most HR managers. I'm not sure.
Yes. So look, so a couple things to react to there. So first and foremost, look, I hear you with there always seems to be a little bit of a cringe, right, with the phrase personal brand. I like thought leadership, and some people don't like that. Recognized expertise, a phrase I've borrowed from Dory Clark. I like that one a lot. That seems to have the least amount of cringe behind it. But here's the way I see it. if it's warranted, if you've got the experience,
Yeah,
if you have the expertise, if you're sharing thoughtfully, if you're engaging respectfully, and that's building an audience for you, then I don't have any issues with that. You can call it a personal brand, you can call it thought leadership, that type of thing. Now, does that work inside an organization? I believe that it does, but it takes an explicit effort, I think, from an organization to truly encourage it. There are always going to be individuals who are going to do this. And the organization may treat those as one-offs. Yes, we're going to support this. No, you got to stop this or go work somewhere else. And I think that's okay, right? If you build a platform for yourself and the organization doesn't support it or is somehow against it, the good news is that platform is going to generate inbound leads for places where you can go work and continue doing that. I think the other interesting thing is that there are organizations that have created essentially these positions inside. So for example, you take somebody like Microsoft. Microsoft for a long time has had these tech evangelist roles, right? The evangelist, the tech evangelist roles in Microsoft are people who have recognized expertise and thought leadership in a particular technology or methodology. Obviously it's going to be in this case a Microsoft one, right? But nevertheless, their job is to go out and create community around this. In my opinion, and I believe that you're right, Mike, I think this is rare, and I think most organizations don't see this as a benefit quite yet. If you start to create the opportunities for people to build their expertise and to share their expertise, and you encourage that, and you reward and incentivize that, you're going to professionally develop the rest of the staff, and in my opinion, in a much more effective and probably a less expensive way than the traditional way that HR does professional development. Whereas you hire, you build you buy a learning management system and you buy a bunch of content for it, and the people have to sit there through the computer-based training, and they're like, okay, I took a class on Java or whatever it is. But if you've got an expert in-house who's a particularly good teacher, has the experience, and can create that with context, no less, right? With the context of your organization around that, that's really powerful. And so I think there's a tremendous benefit here. Oh, and to be very clear, there's not just internal benefit, there's external benefit, because what this does is it helps the hiring brand of the organization. Hey, those folks really encourage people to learn and to share. And there's some smart people working there. I'm going to go work for those people because those people have public personas. So I think there's tremendous benefit here for organizations. I don't think most organizations have seized on this quite yet.
Can imagine, yeah. I was just thinking about it, right? When you mentioned Microsoft, they had this evangelists over years for certain products and programs. And I think these are usually icons and figures in the industry, and knowing they're from a certain company and belong to a certain, organization, that gives the organization obviously a great, let's say, recognition and potential. And now, of course, I'm this manager. I want to start anywhere. Where would I? I know the book came out actually 2 days ago. I know you did a lot of tremendous work, basically based upon the book, I would say. So you are this brand, so you're living up to it. And I think you had already first copies out there. But I couldn't read the whole yet, obviously. But I read about something, what was it? Plant your flag. That's where it starts. Maybe tell us a little bit. We've got about 10 minutes left. Where do I start then when I talk about planting my flag? What does that mean? If I'm now this manager and thinking about my career.
Yeah, so planting your flag is deciding what you're going to build your content platform about. So what slice of your expertise and your experience, your passion, what are you going to talk about? And to me, that's there's a couple of things to think about, right? So what do you know? What have you done? What do you love to do? You should also consider a little bit things that you would like to talk about for a while, because if you're successful with this, you're going to talk about this for a while. Like, as we mentioned earlier, I'm the Lean UX guy.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. I've been talking about Lean UX for 12 years. There are days where I don't necessarily want to talk about Lean UX anymore. But nevertheless, you're going to talk about this for a while. So it should be something that you're genuinely passionate about and interested in. You should think about current trends. So what are some of the current trends? Technological trends, consumer behavior and consumption trends, geopolitical, sociopolitical trends, kind of what's happening in the world, right? In your industry, that type of thing. And then really think about your target audience. Who do you think you'd like to reach? How big is that target audience? And as you create this Venn diagram of those three things, you're going to end up probably with a couple, maybe 3 or 4 different potential flags to plant, right? Some options, some opportunities. And so how do you know which one's going to work? And how do you know that's the right target audience? Well, this is where we start to build in some experimentation, right? So how do we start to test some lightweight engagement with this type of content to this audience? So maybe it's tweeting, maybe it's writing a short blog post, maybe it's simply engaging in a conversation that's already taking place in a discussion forum or LinkedIn or a Facebook group or wherever, right? And start to see what kind of traction you get. And as you start to kind of find that traction, that's where you want to double down. That's where the flag is going to be for a while, right? So for me in 2008, 2009, right, the flag was lean UX because I was trying to solve for agile and user experience design. And it turned out so were a lot of other people, not just us. And so as I started sharing the work that we were doing, they're like, oh, this is interesting. Tell us more. So to me, that's the key. So what slice are you going to own? And there's a couple of challenges here. One challenge is, look, how do you differentiate, right? Everything's been said about everything on the internet, right? So how do you differentiate? Well, you got to think about that, right? So if you're gonna talk about product management or business, let's just talk about business agility, right? If you talk about business agility, right? A lot of folks are talking about business agility. What's going to be your unique perspective on it, right? So you might say, look, I'm talking about business agility. I'm going to bring a design thinking context to it. That could be a slice. You might say, look, I'm going to take business agility and I'm going to just focus on business agility for commerce, right? For traditional brick and mortar retail or for healthcare or whatever it is. And so thinking through like how you're going to differentiate yourself is important. And then testing that to see how well it resonates is also important. Now, the last thing I'll say about planting your flag is people say, well, great, I'm going to be the business agility person about in the healthcare sector. That's terrific. Oh, turns out everything's already been said about business agility in the healthcare sector. Well, it's almost true, right? It does feel like that when you set out that everything's been said. It's one specific thing that has not been said, and that's your story and your perspective. You're the one who has lived your life and built your career in the way that you have. No one else has done that. And so it's your unique experience, your unique path, your unique expertise that you can start to share. Even if it feels like somebody else has already talked about it, no one has told the story like you've told the story. So get out there and start finding your voice, finding those unique things that have happened to you, and share those things, because people will latch on to those concepts if you're authentic about your experience.
Right. Okay, that sounds like actionable guidance here. I was just thinking about agile coaches, same thing probably, and I think we had a conversation the other day. Probably it doesn't make a big difference if you call yourself an enterprise agile coach, which might be an idea to plant another flag, but is that really concrete enough? Is that really something that can make a difference? So I think there are quite a few agile coaches out there. Recently did a search on LinkedIn. I think must have been about 30,000 who are currently actively wearing this in their title job description. So here's an opportunity for maybe 5 or 10 guys to think about differentiating, and it should be possible. Brings me to probably, first of all, I wanna of course point to the book now officially to say, now here's a link, and I think it points to the book, right?
It points to Amazon, yeah. So if you go to
Amazon, your books, and you probably get the book there. So that's one recommendation. All formats, as usual, Kindle, audio, printed, whoever prefers Word, or buy all of them. Not sure if there is packages. That should be a possibility. You are actually, and that's quite funny because I admire you that you give away your recipe while you're actually practicing your recipe, because I recognize, you mentioned it, and that is something which we have in common a little bit. Maybe we didn't talk about details. you're planting at least one flag in the area of HR. And I think that is very interesting because, again, that's attaching to our business agility topic probably. And, yeah, there's so much going on in HR. Maybe tell us a few words about that. Your new flag there.
So look, just like a business, right? Your career needs to evolve and change with the times and really think about kind of what got you here will not get you there. One of the things that I have been trying to do continuously over my career is kind of expand my audience, to kind of keep expanding the audience. So look, I've been working in tech for 20 years, and we've been working with, I've been working with tech teams for a while, but the reality is that if we want to drive the agility of businesses, we can't focus on the tech teams or the product teams solely. That the rest of the organization has to come along. Now, as I've done all this work over the last 20 years, it's always seemed to me that like there's a couple of ceilings where these transformations always seem to hit and get stuck.
Yeah.
One of those has traditionally been HR, especially on both sides of HR, both the recruiting and hiring and the professional development side of HR. And I believe that there's a tremendous opportunity to have a conversation about agility plus HR. And I'd like to have that conversation. Now, my credentials speak to agility. I can talk credibly about that with experience. I don't have a ton of HR credentials. I have opinions. I've had experiences with HR people, and I've done some reading. And so my goal has been over the last 18 months to start to build up my credentials in this conversation. And so injecting myself into conversations on LinkedIn, posting a couple things here and there. I managed to get a piece published in HBR on the blog called Bring Product Thinking to Non-Product Disciplines, which was about human resources. And all of that work is now starting to generate inbound leads to have conversations with me as part of them about how HR can support agility in its own practice and in the entire organization, which is what I want to talk about. And again, to be clear, it's taken 18 months to even start seeing some of those inbound leads. And I suspect that there'll be more and more over time as I continue to go down this particular path.
That's really great. And I was just thinking again, when you said no knowledge about existing HR practice, whatever, or background in the details, still what brought us here will not bring us there. Because obviously HR is changing so much that who knows how that looks in 10 years in a company like Hayer. And maybe HR is totally completely different, and maybe they want to reinvent themselves. Yeah. Jeff, we're actually at the end of our show. Where can people meet you? What kind of activities in the near future, apart from the links, which we'll also put in the comments later on, but is there anything they can look out for?
Well, look, I mean, everything's virtual at the moment, right? Assuming things continue to trend positively here in Europe, then I'll be in Vienna in the fall, teaching with Jeff Patton, teaching our CSPO class with Jeff Patton as well. So that's kind of the next live in-person event that I'm planning, which is in September, and that's a ways to go. There's a link to that on my website. There's a link to that on your website as well. Aside from that, lots and lots of online events at the moment. So just really, if you just keep an eye on my Twitter, which is at JBoogie, long story there, we don't have time for it, or LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to. I always share my events there as well. So a variety of different stuff online promoting the book. The next live event is going to be in Vienna in September.
Cool. Thank you. That's a lot of opportunities, and I really recommend everybody to reach out for you. First of all, read the book, probably get on any of the events following the book, whatever comes. And again, talk product, whatever it is. As you said, CSPO. I always want to add the smart CSPO because it's really going way beyond the standards people see on the market. And a last word, I can imagine now that I heard so much about your musical career where JBoogie might come from. But again, we don't have time to look into that. Okay, Jeff, it has been a real pleasure having you. And yeah, that's basically it for today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was great. And I look forward to seeing you in person later this year. Thanks so much.
Yeah. And have a great time with your further events, and good luck with your book, everything around it.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.